Peggy.
I'm right here.
I'm sorry.
Sneaking around behind you.
Deep in conversation there. Sure.
Okay, floodplain ordinance. Again, this is something that was started back in about 2010. For lack of funding, I think the FEMA just decided they really didn't have enough money to follow through with the program, and now they've been funded again, and they are trying to address all areas of the country that have not been participating in the flood insurance program. The crux of this ordinance is that there is every jurisdiction is mapped. In our case, we're mapped. By adopting the ordinance, the city has the ability to enforce certain rules and regulations, and those rules really are you can't build in the floodplain, which is kind of a common sense type thing, and they give you a minimum elevation that you have to be above the OHW with your first floor in every new building or reconstructed building. That's really the crux of the ordinance. There's a lot of verbiage here, but that's really where it gets. The intent is that, again, we would have a public hearing on the ordinance at the next Planning Commission meeting. The anticipated action would be that the Planning Commission would recommend that the City Council adopt the ordinance. If there's any specific questions, hopefully I can answer them for you, but there's a lot of verbiage here, and some of it is a little bit technical, but the bottom line is it allows anybody to apply for flood insurance if they think they need it. If in fact the city does not participate in the program, then if somebody wants to have flood insurance, they cannot get it without participation in the program. And that's really important because many of the mortgage companies today are requiring it. And that allows prospective owners of property to apply for mortgages and get mortgages. And that's really the handle that they have on you that forces you to do it. But
what's the downside of saying you participate or don't participate?
the downside, if you don't participate, is that anybody that applies for a mortgage could be turned down because the city doesn't participate and they do not have the ability to apply for flood insurance.
What's the downside of participating?
That is the downside, or
I mean, if we say we will
The
adopt
downside-
it, what's the
oh.
downside of adopting it?
Not a lot in Breezy Point because I think there's only like 5 properties that are close to being in the floodplain.
Is there a cost?
The cost is just the administration. It's only administration.
Then where's the thought process coming to this?
What?
Why would we not do it then?
That's,
There's no downside, there's just an upside.
yeah, that is,
Okay,
not doing it is really not a good option.
okay.
Where are the parcels that it applies to?
And I was just having a conversation with Chad Connor about that. He's in the process of trying to identify them, but there's 2 of them, I believe, on Assawana McKee. And they're trying to find out whether they actually are in the floodplain area. But even if they are in the floodplain area, those 5 properties would be required to have flood insurance. Today they can't get it.
So why didn't we do this 7 years ago or 5 years ago?
We didn't have the maps and the designation at the time.
FEMA was right.
And FEMA came through and mapped Crow Wing County. And Crow Wing County is scheduled to adopt the ordinance August 1st.
Okay. So can we blame Mike because we didn't do it?
We can blame any,
You're in planning commission, weren't you?
you can blame anybody you want. Actually, it wasn't, it wasn't,
Oh,
it wasn't anybody's blame. Actually, FEMA was the one that had the maps partially done, but they didn't have them all done. And they just suspended all the work on them.
okay.
So this is for the council, so what do we have to do?
Because it's going to become part of the zoning ordinance, the city, the planning commission is going to hold the public hearing.
Oh, okay.
And I would assume,
Yes,
Gary,
ma'am.
this is boilerplate language being offered to the city by the state?
This is boilerplate language that is coming from the DNR.
Okay.
I can tell you that it's relatively simple. This language is relatively simple compared to some others. The folks that have jurisdictions that abut rivers and those type of places that normally flood a lot, their ordinance is probably 25 pages long.
I'll move to recommend, or whatever we have to do, but can I harp on my favorite subject? This is information we should be giving to the public. Could we get an article in the paper, the mayor write an article, column, I don't care, something, because everybody in this community should know that we have this.
Yeah, and the intent is to have a public hearing on it and
Well,
publish
public
it.
hearing, we don't always get people here, but they do read the paper.
Yeah, we can do that.
So, all right, I will move that we.
We don't need a motion
We
tonight.
don't? Oh, okay, there we go.
Yes, sir.
Jerry?
Yes.
I'll direct it at you. My floodplain,
I don't believe you are.
15 feet from the water.
It goes by your elevation of your first floor.
Who shoots the lines?
Surveyor.
Who takes transit?
Most of that information they can take off of aerial photos and topography.
Okay. Catch thinking, don't I?
How much variation is there in the level of Pelican?
Pardon?
How much variation is there in the level of Pelican Lake?
Not very much.
I wouldn't think so.
The OHW is, I believe, is like 1207.5 or something like that. And the highest known elevation of I think I have it. It's less than a foot. The highest known elevation is less than a foot. Now, Pelican is regulated by a dam.
Don't open that. Don't open that.
I'm not going
The
there.
intention was never for the lake to flow that way,
That's
right?
right. Last question, briefly. You've got to be declared flood plain zone before you buy insurance?
No,
Good, I don't need to know. I
No.
want some.
anybody, if the city participates, anybody that wants it can buy it. If the city doesn't participate it, the folks that want it can't buy it.
Okay.
Will we get a mark for the public hearing on the 5 parcels?
Yeah, you will.
Will they get notified of this happening?
They're actually going to get a letter from the county.
Now,
Once they adopt it?
Yeah. It's basically, again, it's part of the elevation scenario.
Well, my hope is that the next agenda item will move fairly quickly, which is a public hearing to consider ordinance 17-03. And I will open the public hearing and ask Jerry to take us through the staff review, which essentially is Joe's email.
Joe's memo is addressed most of the issues, but I'll take you through the ordinance or the proposed ordinance. And this proposed ordinance is proposing amendments to some of the existing language. And the first language change is an accessory structure size. It addresses roof overhangs and roof sizes to be part of the square footage requirement of, or minimum and maximum square footages that are allowable for accessory structures. The second proposal is to take some old language out of the resort commercial zone. It's a cleanup thing more than anything. The third section that's being amended is storage and screening. And I think I could probably characterize this as this is a reaction to the Finger Hut trailer. And it clears that up a little bit. The fourth amendment is allowing banners for advertising to go from 7 days to 21 days for nonprofit organizations and nonprofit activities. And the third, or the fifth and last one, is a amendment to the airport zone that allows, or it reduces the setbacks on the side setbacks from 15 feet to 10 feet.
I saw that there was a good discussion of most of this at last month's meeting.
Absolutely.
So that's good, but Peggy?
I guess the only comment I'd have to make, and this just really has to do with a couple of them, we actually have, excuse me, a consequence in the storage screening issue, in that the person can't get a certificate of occupancy, which is great, and it's good to have a consequence. But we don't have consequences sometimes for some of the other things, like the sign without a permit. You asked them to remove that sign, and they didn't do it, and there was no consequence.
I think there could have been consequences.
Should have been consequences.
Yeah. We could have issued a ticket, and they would have been subject to misdemeanor violations. That could have been done. Again, we were dealing with a quasi-semi organization and a very stubborn individual, and we tried to work with that individual.
And it's good, and I think to do it fine, but I don't think this should become a habit.
No, and
Because somebody is stubborn, they get away with it.
I don't think that's the intention, but I think the 21 days helps that situation rather than just the 7 days.
So we bowed to them is what it amounts to. Like I think what Peggy's trying to say, if it's a continuing violation, write the damn ticket. If it's a one-time deal or a two-time deal, not so much. But if they just say, screw you guys, I'm gonna do what I wanna do, let them pay a price for it.
I would guarantee you that if our present administrator is around a year from now and it happens again, there will be 10 violations issued.
Bingo, that's what we wanted to hear.
And I would hope that some of the city council members would help in that enforcement, because some of them have an ear to that specific problem.
40% of them are here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, on section 3, recreational equipment, do we have a definition of recreational equipment?
No,
Because if a license is required on a fish house, a license should be required on any recreational equipment that's stored there too.
well, in anything that is normally licensed to get over the road, we would do that.
But we should have a definition on recreational equipment.
We can add that to the list of the next one.
Anything new on that storage / temporary camping?
Let's stick to this.
That's part of it, though.
We'll do that first.
That was the issue.
Okay. I mean, that's part of the licensing.
Any other questions of Jerry? Any public statements?
Not like you.
You can't just sit there all night.
You're very patient.
Yeah.
But when it comes to,
Need your
I'm sorry,
name.
Justin Walling, Breezy Point. When it comes to item number 4, I understand that, and I really have nothing to do with it, but Breezy Point has so few community events, 2 or 3, and technically, and I don't want to put a target on my back or any other businesses, I can keep a banner out as long as I want to, as long as I stay within the amount of propaganda outside, and as long as it's not tethered and all that stuff, and I can keep it out all year round, and for a nonprofit to be able to advertise a community event for only 7 days, even 21 days, I think is a little short, to be honest with you. I would support a longer time that he's able to keep a banner out, or anybody, not Ice Fest, any of those things, as long as the banner's kept in good condition. So that would be just.
Thank you.
That saying, I think Mr. Brock would like to mention something about the butterfly release next Saturday.
11 o'clock, be there. Bring it on.
It's a new time, so you gotta know it's different.
Pardon me?
It's a new time.
Amen. 11 o'clock, half-hour program, everybody gets to the lake. Bring the kids. Big deal.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Your kids.
I will close the public hearing
Is that a public hearing?
and, and move to the next item, which is recommend adoption of the ordinance. What we need is a motion to approve the amended ordinance. Correctly?
And recommend city council approval.
Yeah.
I recommend that we approve ordinance 1703 as written and send it to council and ask for their approval.
We have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion passed.
I have a question to ask Jerry. What has happened with the house on County Road 11?
Nothing at this point.
Because he's got a second camper out there now that's open and there.
There's always been a camper. There's always been two out there.
Yeah, but now it's open and there's a lot of people there and,
He assures me that he's only doing it for 14 days or less.
That either one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what he said. No, the
One's a fifth wheel, I think, right?
The issue that we have is that just because that camper is there, it can be there because the lot is over an acre in size. And again, if we don't want to allow campers to be used as guest quarters, we probably have to amend the definition or the rules for guest quarters and to have a minimum square size on the guest quarters. Say, or a minimum width or something like that, like we do in the R3 area and where we have a 26 by 26 minimum. We may have to go someplace like that in order to do that. Now, I don't know if that's the right way to go, but it's the only thing that I can think of to not allow that type of activity to continue.
What about the idea of saying, if you've got it on your property for storage, that same piece of property, or that same trailer cannot be used as temporary camping?
I don't know how you enforce that. You know, because people can bring something onto an improved piece of property today and do limited camping. They have that right.
They're claiming this is storage.
No, they're not claiming. This is limited camping. That is what they're claiming.
For 14 days.
For 14 days, and the rest of the time they're just storing it on the piece of property.
But can't you put a restriction on, you can't use, on that same piece of property, treated as both storage and limited camping?
That's kind of where I'm going with this thing, with the minimum size. That would not allow you to use a camper on a permanent basis as a guest quarters. And I think that's what you don't want to allow.
Yeah, but they're not calling it a guest quarters, they're still calling it limited camping, so they've still got it
But
like a loophole.
the bottom line is, he could bring a camper and store a camper there forever. Because he's got over an acre of land. Now, if he uses that for 14 days, what's the difference? He can still have that camper legally on his piece of property.
Unless we change the ordinance to make it
Unless you
illegal.
change the property. Now, if you're going to change the ordinance to say you can't have campers stored on your property, I think you're creating another ball of worms that you really don't want to get to, because there's a lot of folks that have campers that they
Yeah.
not only
They
don't,
pull them south
pull them south in the winter, they use them on the weekends, they go different places. So there's not an easy fix to this.
No, I mean, see, there's loopholes all over the place, that's the problem.
Yeah, and how do you, if we take away one loophole, which means you can't store it there,
Can you get into a screening issue to make it more difficult?
Or a permitting issue.
well,
14 days you issue the permit.
maybe it's an interim use permit.
And 14 days later, you bring it back, you're done. Now, if you violate that, and you see a campfire, everybody having fun, now you cite
Now,
them.
you gotta put some restrictions on to make it enforceable, is what-
That's
that's
right.
one of them, whether you,
But,
you don't wanna say that the people who live up here and they pull their fifth wheel or whatever it is to Florida in the wintertime, they should be able to do that. But maybe maybe they need to store it in a place that's, not visible to the neighbors or the public right away.
so can I put a fence around it and do the same thing?
Sure. Fence them in. I mean, that's a way, I'm just trying to make it hard on them, I guess.
Well, and, you know, in my thing is, I want to have something that's enforceable, not that is just your whim or my whim or somebody else's whim. It's actually against the rules and you can't do it anymore. And I'm not so worried about this guy. This is an example, but I'm worried about the next guy that wants to put it over here. Or the next, or somebody that actually wants to utilize a trailer as a guest quarters. Because today, guest quarters are allowed as a conditional use permit.
Why don't you work on that?
Yeah, believe me, we've been doing a lot of noodling, but we really haven't come up with a total solution for it yet.
Keep noodling.
It's, sometimes for every action, there's a reaction, and I worry more about not so much putting the screws to this guy, but what am I gonna do to somebody else?
The interim use permit might be the way to go, and but we could put a 14-day condition on it, and then you pull the permit.
Totally agree with you.
Well, technically, under the ordinance today, limited camping is allowed up to 14 days. So does that mean we have interim use permits for everybody in the city that wants to do limited camping on their piece of property? That's going to require 30 days notice, and it's going to require publication and a public hearing for every time somebody brings a camper onto their property. The June meeting before the 4th of July will be a forever meeting, just trying to work on interim uses. That doesn't seem to be realistic.
Other than an occasional complaint, maybe there's not that big of a foul.
You know, and I haven't heard any complaints other than the initial one on this piece of
It
property.
was a complaint which triggered this thing.
Yeah.
So,
And quite frankly, after the complaint, we're looking at it and we're saying, well, he can technically have that camper there because he's got over an acre of land.
But
If he didn't have an acre of land, it would be a different issue too.
And Jerry, there are a lot of campers on lots that are less than an acre.
Far less than an acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I don't,
The other issue is, again, you allow, and I understand this was because of a city councilman that we do even have this exemption.
me?
Huh? No, it wasn't you. A previous city council member had an issue when they proposed this ordinance. And the exception was made for something over 30 feet. If you had over an acre of land, you could store that thing on a piece of property
Interesting.
for a change. But it's not an easy solution. And I wish I had the answer for you, but I don't.
If I would have been here last month, I would have known the answer to this question. Is the issue the fact that a camper is there, or is the issue that people are using that camper?
I think it's both,
Okay,
and I think the issue is that two neighbors don't get along,
yeah, there you go.
more than anything. And it's,
Privilege of owning an acre.
yeah, it's getting even more than anything else.
Not sure if we have a definition for recreational vehicle as we're kind of talking about this, but it wasn't that floodplain.
Pardon?
That floodplain ordinance
Yeah?
has that recreational vehicle definition.
Oh, it does?
I don't know if that's needs to be.
Yeah.
rest of our ordinance, but-
They make some concessions for recreational things, temporary structures.
I will open forum number 2.
Let's get on that calendar.
I waited just for this.
I wonder,
Please comment. After my vast years of experience here, I just would like to compliment the planning commission. This is a little redundant on my part, but it's so refreshing to see a due diligence planning commission, educated planning commission, and also the zoning administrator is very helpful to you guys. I know what that's like to sit in those chairs. 3 planning commissions, it's not easy. So it's very refreshing, and my hats are off to you.
thank you.
Don't like me.
Yeah, and
You stayed around for all that, my goodness, you got willpower.
That's right.
I want to share that congratulations too. Mr. Spizo has told me that he absolutely refused to come to a
Yeah.
planning and zoning commission meeting, so this was
First.
a real breakthrough tonight.
That's the first.
The word's out, we're entertaining.
Well, you get kicked in the teeth so many times, folks off the record,
Yeah,
that pretty soon you can't get up off the floor again. He gets up off the floor.
That's why he sent us.
Still on the record,
I
Jay.
know. That's off the
Send
record.
Jeff Johnson, because
All
then he
the
wouldn't
time,
have to know.
too. Jeff's been here long. Yes, we can adjourn.
yeah. But he has told me that he has heard that we're trying hard to do a good job.
You're doing a great job. in my
Can't
opinion.
always do everything right, you just gotta do the best you can.
Do we get a raise for that then?
Yeah, isn't that what on your guys' city council's agenda is this salary stuff?
Did I close the public? No, I didn't close.
How about you?
Yes,
Thank you very much for the
No, thanks.
The compliment.
You need to hear it.
I will close the open forum number 2 and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good meeting. What are we wondering?